Welcome to Absolute Trust Talk with your host, Kirsten Howe. Absolute Trust Talk brings you tips, tools, advice, and interviews to help you build a reliable knowledge base on estate planning, business, and finance to start preparing for your future today.
Hello and welcome to Absolute Trust Talk. I am Kirsten Howe, and I'm the managing attorney at Absolute Trust Counsel. I'm glad you could join us today for this episode of our podcast. Despite the current president's efforts to prevent immigration into our country and to deport immigrants out of our country, the fact is that we do have a lot of people in this country, especially in California, especially in the Bay Area, who immigrated to our country from somewhere else. And those people also need to do estate planning and want to do estate planning. And often their cases present unique issues that we need to focus on, issues that we don't otherwise need to focus on with clients who have no relevant international ties. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Some of those questions that come up during estate planning when our clients have international issues. And joining me in that conversation is my esteemed colleague, Janet Brewer. Welcome, Janet. Janet Brewer is the principal of the law office of Janet L. Brewer, and she's headquartered in Los Altos, California. Janet has served clients throughout Silicon Valley and the Bay Area for more than 30 years. She is a certified specialist in estate planning and probate, certified by the State Bar as a specialist. Very accomplished. She, in addition to being having a bachelor's degree and a JD, she has an MBA and an LLM, which is like a graduate degree for lawyers that they get after law school. Because she's located in Silicon Valley, she frequently deals with and has developed deep experience with international estate planning situations. Approximately a quarter of her practice focuses on helping non-resident aliens, visa holders, green card holders, and other international families plan for their U.S.-based assets. As a member of STEP, which is Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It's an invitation-only group of estate planning professionals with special knowledge in international estate planning. She regularly prepares estate plans for foreign nationals who own property or live in the U.S. and for U.S. citizens who own property abroad. So she kind of has that expertise that is the reason she's here today. And she's been on my list of potential guests for a long time. Finally got her here. Welcome, Janet, and thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kirsten. I appreciate your having me.
Okay, so we're here to talk about international estate planning issues. And one thing you said to me as we were preparing for this episode, which I really liked and is true, but I hadn't really thought about it, is that really for all of our clients, we have to focus on not just the law, but on how the plans will work and on a practical level. And an example of that in the international context is the issue of guardianship, which is an important component of estate planning. If people have minor children, we have to talk about it. But there are other things we also have to talk about when it's an international kind of a case. Why don't you walk us through some of, like a typical scenario and the issues that have to be addressed in that scenario?
The biggest thing that my international clients, especially the ones who are here on visas, are worried about really is the guardianship of their children. They want to make sure that if something happens to them, the children can get back to living with, their parents or their siblings back in whatever country it is that they're from.
Right. And let's talk about the practicalities of that, because that's what you really kind of have to focus on when the client's sitting there with you. Can a non-U.S. citizen or even a non-U.S. resident, can that person be appointed a guardian of a child who is here in the U.S., possibly born in the U.S., a U.S. citizen?
Right.
Can a foreigner be appointed by the court to be a guardian?
And that answer varies with the state that is dealing with the guardianship.
Sure.
In California, the answer is yes. In some other states, the courts will not even appoint someone who is not a resident of that state.
Okay.
So, for example, I believe, I haven't looked at this in a number of years, but when I was looking into it some time ago, Illinois, for example, will not let someone who is not an Illinois resident become the guardian for the children. The
Okay.
guardian must live in the state of Illinois. But in California, the law will allow foreign guardians to be appointed, whether it's, from a different state or it's from a different country. As you know, again, not to nerd out too much, but every guardianship, a court investigator is appointed to look into the guardian's background and make sure that it's an appropriate individual for the child to live with. They don't want to put the child into a drug dealer's home. They don't want to put the child into, some other felon's homes, things like that. So there is actually a court employee who investigates everyone.
Yeah.
When they're dealing with a foreign guardianship, even if it's a close relative, they are much more careful because once the child leaves California and goes, to England or to Israel or to Hong Kong or even to Canada, the court is not going to have jurisdiction over that person. They're not going to be able to get the child back and
Right.
rescue them from a bad situation.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, they still have jurisdiction over the guardianship, but they don't have any ability to, send law enforcement out or anything.
Exactly. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, that's definitely a distinction. Technically, there's jurisdiction, but there's no enforcement
No,
capability,
no actual power.
no actual power. And frankly, I mean, Kristen, you encounter this in your own practice. Every time you have a client who wants to appoint a guardian who lives out of the state of California, the court also has jurisdiction, but has very limited enforcement powers when any child is removed from the state of California. Now, if they're within the United States, obviously it's a little bit easier to figure out an enforcement mechanism or to, get the sister state to cooperate.
Exactly. We have the FBI and we have reciprocity and the states work together. But
Exactly.
we can't necessarily say that about Hong Kong or Malaysia or even England, those
Or,
are,
even, or again, even Canada. I mean, we have no enforcement,
especially now.
especially now. So, exactly. So, I think that frankly, a lot of attorneys encounter this and they don't necessarily think about what the ramifications are if they name, even if they're naming somebody that's just in Nevada or in Oregon or in Arizona as the guardian. It's going to be a more thorough vetting process. It's going to take more time.
Right. Well, and that brings up another really important consideration when we're talking to our clients about guardianships and they're thinking about some international type of person is the timing. If, these situations arise where a child needs a guardian because something terrible has happened,
Right.
the parents have suddenly passed away or become incapacitated. And you and I both, I'm sure, provide for that in our documentation that there might be a lag between when the officially nominated guardian can get to the child physically, and we might have to designate some alternate who we're not saying this person is our nomination for guardian, but this person can take custody of our child so that CPS doesn't have to come into the picture. But with an international person, there's probably even more issues that need to be addressed in that period of time between when they can get to the child.
Right. And again, I think it's not a lot different than if you've named a guardian who lives in New York.
Yeah.
Um, what I tell people is, a guardian who lives more than 2 hours away, if something were to happen to the parents, if the guardian lives more than 2 hours away, they're not going to be able to pick the child up from childcare.
Right.
They're not going to be able to relieve the teenage babysitter that they've got watching the child.
Yeah.
And, there needs to be some sort of a temporary guardianship that is put in place. It's almost the same. I don't know what you do in your practice. In my practice, I have a form it's a form much like what you give the kids when they're going to be going on a school trip, where you're giving some adult that is the chaperone the right to provide emergency medical treatment to take care of the child until the parents get there. And the good news is, and I hope it's true for you as well, this has not been a real major issue in my practice. It has arisen a handful of times, but it's a handful of times over 30 plus years. So one in every 10,000 cases or something along that line. but nonetheless, you have to prepare for it. And it's mostly making sure that Child Protective Services feels comfortable that they can give custody of this child over to this other person rather than take the child into foster care.
Right.
Yeah, a responsible adult who lives nearby, who can care for the child for a couple of days until the other person gets here. But the international guardianship, in my mind, is a question of degree, not difference.
That's a good point. Yeah, it really is not unlike a guardian who has to come from Alaska or Delaware. It's not any different from that. It just might take 13 hours instead of 8 hours, but whatever.
Right. Again, just like if they're coming from Alaska, Delaware, New York, they're not going to be able to basically tell the kids, come on, kids, let's pack a bag and let's head back home. If they take the child over state borders without having judicial approval, now we do have the FBI involved, especially if, and I'm sure you've never encountered this in your practice, but, mom wants her sister to be the guardian, dad wants his brother to be the guardian, and whichever one gets there first decides to take the child back to whatever state that they're going to. You may very well have a custodianship or a guardianship battle on your hands, and the court is going to get involved, and law enforcement could also get involved at that point, because now you've got this person who's taken the child out of the state without permission.
Right.
And there's someone who's objecting to the fact that that happened. Again, it's extreme. It doesn't happen often, but as I tell people, it's our job to think of the things that might happen and let them decide for themselves whether they want to take that risk after we've informed them of here's what the risks are and here are the consequences.
That's right. That is exactly our job. Let me ask you this also. I think when we have a situation where the guardian may have to travel, we need to perhaps address that in the other documents. The trustee perhaps needs to be specifically authorized to pay for that travel and maybe make interim distributions to that guardian, maybe also to the temporary guardian. So there's money for the child, whoever the child is with, there's money to take care of the child. These are things that, if the guardian lives in the same city, we don't really think about as much. But
right. Yeah. I mean, again, there are some differences, but to a certain extent, it is a question of degree. I tell people, I have a lot of, because I'm in Silicon Valley, I have a lot of engineering clients. So I tell people that it really is somewhat like a software program, in that the software program can only execute the instructions that it's given. And, if you have not specifically said to the trustee, you have the authority to pay this money to someone other than the beneficiary, other than the child, they're violating the terms of the trust. And they really, although there's nothing stopping them, they really should not do it, because they could get in trouble if someone were to question, why did you pay out, $10,000 for plane fare for somebody to get here from London on the next available flight? There's no authority in the document itself to make payments to anyone other than the child.
right.
So
I love that. Yeah, I love that analogy. It's like software. I've never thought of that's a very clever way to explain that. And I'm going to steal that, I think.
you're more than welcome to steal it, because it's true. I mean,
Exactly.
if the instruction isn't there, it can't be executed.
Be executed. I like that. One other thing that I think you mentioned in the typical scenario that you encounter, where your client is a visa holder, maybe they're only here for a little while, they're planning to go back, or maybe they're just starting out, but they do have children and they just really haven't yet accumulated a lot of wealth. And I think you know where I'm going with this. How do we help them with that issue?
Well, one of the things that I suggest, and I think this is where you're going with it, I'm not 100% sure, but this is an area where I think that life insurance plays an important role. Among other things, sometimes, again, if they've got stock, they may not be able to cash it out that quickly. Even if there's a successor trustee in place, the brokerage firm may require, before they actually accept the successor trustee, they may want to see a death certificate that shows that the person that they've got listed as the initial trustee is now deceased and this other person is in place. It can take 4 to 6 weeks to get a death certificate, especially these days. But and this isn't a 100% solution by any means, but life insurance typically pays out much more quickly. You don't have to worry about, are you selling stock at the bottom of the market? And maybe if you had been able to wait a few days, the tariff rate had come down.
Wait till this afternoon.
Wait until this afternoon when it goes from 145% down to 30%. Maybe you could have gotten a more favorable price for the stock. And again, as a trustee, you have a duty to look at some of those things.
Worry about those things, yeah.
You have to worry about it. So the good news about life insurance, it may still take a couple of weeks. They may still want to have a death certificate, but at least you don't have to worry about, am I selling this stock at the bottom of the market? And now there's going to be less to take care of the beneficiary. If you've got a $100,000 life insurance policy, you're going to get $100,000 regardless of what the stock market is doing. If you've got a $500,000 life insurance policy, you're going to get $500,000 regardless of what the stock market is doing. So it is a stable form of currency that you can cash in. Well, you can cash in when it's necessary and have the money readily available to take care of the bills of the child and also the guardians.
But we've only just scratched the surface, I think, with all of this, and we could go on. And I think that we will, but we're going to do that in a future episode, not right now. So Janet Brewer, thank you so much for being here and talking to me about this aspect of international estate planning.
Thanks, Kirsten. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah. And thank you all for joining us here today. I hope you learned a lot. I know I certainly did. And I look forward to connecting with you next time.
Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Absolute Trust Talk Live. If you enjoyed listening in, then don't forget to subscribe. You can find us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you may listen by searching Absolute Trust Talk. While you're there, we would also love for you to leave us a review. And then why not share your favorite episodes with family, friends, or colleagues too? You can find all of our shows and corresponding show notes by visiting absolutetrustcouncil.com. You'll also find a variety of other free resources, including our ebooks, videos, blogs, presentations, and more. If you need help with your estate planning or administration, we also offer a free discovery call to help get the process started. You can find more information on booking your session by visiting absolutetrustcouncil.com/scheduling. If you join us for the broadcast, you can submit questions during the show. But if not, don't worry. You can always get in touch with us by sending a quick message to info@absolutetrustcouncil.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you soon.
This podcast is not meant to take the place of legal advice from an attorney and does not create an attorney-client relationship. If you do have a legal question or issue, please consult with an attorney.